Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly Podcast. The rain saves England, or maybe India, in the first test at Trent Bridge after a Joe Root masterclass. His first home test century in 3 years kept England in the contest. We'll be talking all about that test, the latest rounds of the 100, a bit on Bangladesh-Australia, where the Tigers are 3-1 up at the time of recording, and much more in today's show. I'm Rana and I'm joined by features editor at Wisden.com, Taha Hashim, the managing editor at Wisden.com, Ben Gardner, and podcast newbie, Cameron Ponsonby. So Cam, we'll start with you. Did you think it was a prank when you got the call up?
Yes, to begin with. Much like John Simpson and any dream call up. I actually messaged a friend of mine who I know listens to this to be like, I'm on, expecting him to be happy, and he was like, oh, I actually quite like that podcast. So you've lost one listener immediately from me being here, so there we go.
I thought it was a wind-up.
Well, let's get straight into the test match then. It was slightly frustrating with all the rain that was about, but when we did have play, it was very absorbing. Todd, do you think the rain saved England? What do you think was going to happen if we got a full day in on day 5?
Yeah, it was definitely advantage India, 100%. But I still had a gut instinct that England still could still do something there. But I mean, with the way England are as a test side right now, if India get over the line there, start off this series with a win, then you're really worrying about England. Whereas now you're thinking England could take a lot from that second innings. I mean, 303 compared to that first innings was 183. Joe Root amongst the runs looking, playing one of the best innings of his career. Ollie Robinson looking the part. You can kind of start to spin out the positives. Dom Sibley batting time.
Really good 21.
Yeah. Even Johnny Bairstow looking the part, even though he, kind of gave it away. Had India, I mean, if we look back to that 2018 where, we had that Edgbaston test and say India win that one, and it's been said about that series, England won it 4-1, but India were well in it. Say India had won that one, that could have changed the complexion of that series completely. And here, we're still going into the second test. England could take a lot from that first test, in the second half of that first test. And we've got a series on, whereas, it would have been crisis time, I guess, in English cricket if England lost that one.
Yeah, I think in a way it actually sets the series up better than if there'd been a result, in a way. I think that, actually, Taha's right, but both teams kind of come away with some boxes checked, some things sort of still, questions to answer. Like Bumrah being back in form for India is huge, but that 3-4-5 didn't make runs. Root obviously being back in form is absolutely enormous for England. They just batted better, slightly better just as a team in that third innings. And so if one team comes away, especially if India come away from that 1-0 up, you actually, even though England have kind of done all right, you still see it going quite badly wrong for them, and actually they end up losing one of the next two, and then they're kind of out of the series at that point. Whereas now you've got it and it's almost what the 2018 series missing, as Taha says, a couple of draws in that makes it a better series, because it was, each game was close, but England actually kind of ran away with it just because they won the key moments or whatever. And this game, it feels really, really well. And especially because we were saying on last week's pod that we were this series has come around really quickly. It's sort of caught us by surprise a bit. It's almost the perfect way to almost feel your way back into Test cricket, a nice, exciting game, but that in the end, sort of doesn't matter because it's a draw. And now it's the real stuff. And yeah.
Cameron, let's talk about Joe Root. He's averaged in the low 30s in home tests over the last 3 years. I think there were some genuine concerns among some whether or not we'd ever see him produce the kind of innings we saw on day 4. You actually watched the innings. Ben, Taha and I were at Phil's wedding. Where does that rank among his best test hundreds, and what do you think he did so well in that innings that he might not have done over the last couple of years?
Well, there was a great article on Wisden.com ranking all 21 test hundreds. I believe it went in at number 3. And I think something I feel like people have forgotten with this innings, it was an amazing watch, but part of what made it amazing was at the beginning, for his first 30 balls, the comms, I think it was Atherton or whoever was going, he looks kind of all over the shop. He's a shot a ball here, really frenetic, stuff's always happening. And I think eventually he got past that kind of frenetic stage, and all of a sudden it just meant he was just scoring runs really quickly. And so I don't necessarily know how different it was to the years gone by. He was still playing his big drives. He was really strong square of the wicket. And I felt something he did particularly well, which was an example of he does it because he's very good and we can't relate to that, is when he was playing Jadeja, not necessarily the quicks. He was getting right back and kind of cutting him just outside off stump. And on comms, people were grimacing, going, "Oh, please, Joe, don't play that shot." But it was just an example of how in control he was of the game, that Jadeja was dropping, not even short, just kind of back of the length. He was like, right, that's me there. And then it was great that his shot to reach 3 figures, it was then down the ground. And we had this amazing shot where the camera pulled out. You saw Joe Root giving it the big one, Sam Curran running the other way, fist up in the air. And it was just all in all kind of such an exciting innings to watch because it was just moving so quickly.
Ben, you wrote that article on Wisden.com, and we were talking about it in the office yesterday. And what stands out about so many of Root's great hundreds is the rate at which he scores. And actually, I can completely see why the commentators thought it was frenetic. But I did think that even in the first innings as well, that this was kind of like, this is what old peak 2014 to 2016 Root batted like when he was in good nick.
Yeah, exactly right. Because I remember like one of them that's quite low down that list is like an 149 he made against India at the Oval when England went into the game only 2-1 up. So to win the series, and it was like nearly a run a ball. You're like, that's ridiculous. That's that low down. There were also the reasons for it, but like that's kind of just what he used to do. Like you forget actually, how quickly he scored without. I mean, that's the cliche is you look up and you get to 30, but it's a cliche for a reason. Like he would be busy, and I think his first 100 as well. I thought it was interesting that he'd only had 9 fours in that, and yet was scoring at like well over the strike rate of 50, like over 60, I think. And so that is what like peak Root would do. I think, as you said, we didn't actually watch all the innings ball by ball, but watching the highlights, 2 things stood out, I think, and it just showed that he seemed like really like particularly like fired up for this one, which makes sense. I mean, he's had like a tough time. Really, like he's been dealt with just like a rough hand just as England captain, because the rest and rotation policy, fine in theory, but like you do have to realise that like test captains are judged by results, and Root will be judged by results, and those results are coming when he doesn't have anywhere near his best side available to him. And then you get to this series when he has something close to his best side available, albeit with Ben Stokes out for reasons that's fair enough, but still you can see how he could get sort of like frustrated with just like his lot essentially, and also the practice coming in has been essentially non-existent. To have all of that and then to kind of be like on that, I can see why on that third innings you'd come out just playing all your shots, because you're like, well, I may as well go down fighting, and then you get a few away, and then you're sort of you're into it, and you're sort of like properly like fight. So there was when Dom Sibley, and I'm sure we'll get to Sibley in a second, but when he overturned a decision against him to be given not out, Root like properly celebrated. It was like which I mean a lot of England fans were probably hoping it would go the other way at that point, but Root obviously he loves batting with Sibley. I think there was a stat going around that he averages about 100 when he's batting with Sibley, so there's possibly something in that, but also just showed that he was living every ball whether he was batting it or not. And then his celebration on getting to 3 figures as well, he was sort of like did his sort of like his low sort of rising fist pump and then like a beat of the chest. And that like I mean Root being informed has changed the whole complexion of England's batting lineup, because especially in England where even though India batted pretty well, they still they didn't cross 300 in that first innings. A couple of players in properly good form, like that makes you kind of like a competitive test team in England. And if Root is now one of those, just one game, and he has had struggles a long time in England, that is absolutely huge.
It's been a long time since he had a big summer here. What was the last Test century in England? 2018 Oval. And that was obviously overshadowed by Cook's final ton. That same Test match was when Anderson, overtook McGrath. England need him to have a big summer, don't they? And so this is a good sign. I mean, earlier this year we were talking about Root coming back, but that was in Sri Lanka, that was India, that was against the turning ball. That's a completely different scenario. We've not seen him thrive in England for a while in conditions against the Dukes. And so that's a huge tick for England. I mean, you can't, underestimate that. That's, I mean, massive Test match that.
Root is, he's almost evens to end up with the most runs ever scored in a calendar year. It's been a long year for England, but he's already got 400. He's got over 1,000 runs at 60. Is it almost a shame that he's in this run of form when he's getting so little support from those around him? If you go through the list of the guys who've got most runs for England in 2021, it's quite interesting. So Root's got 1,064 at 59. Dan Lawrence is in second place with 354 runs at 27. Sibley 324 runs at 21. Burns 314 at 31. Pope 237 at 21. Bairstow 226 at 25. Stokes 203 at 25. Butler 202 at 33. Then Crawley 156 at 11. How frustrating is that Root is battling so many other things, but also that he has to carry his teammates at the moment?
Yeah, I wonder if part of it's almost a bit cause and effect, though. Kind of it is on Root, and Root knows that. And occasionally, when pressure is put on you more, that it's only down to you, that can almost like lift the pressure, because you're like, well, if I'm not going to do it, no one else is, so might as well be me. And it's something I did genuinely notice on Saturday, watching him. I was like, why are you so happy? Like, he was just batting, and it wasn't like he was on 60 or 70. He was just smiling. He was high-fiving Sibley. And I kind of feel like he might be embracing this challenge as being in arguably the form of his life. And he's like, if it's not me, we are stuffed, basically. On the flip side, yes, of course, it's immensely frustrating, because England have scored just under 500 runs in this Test match, and Root's got 170 of them. And it was a game on a knife edge, and had we got 50 or 60 more through the other 20 innings combined, the game's a different kind of it's a different game.
It's always kind of been like this for Root. You know, his career starts in India, which is the high point for that great Test team. So he's always been kind of battling against what's been happening around him. Obviously now it's heightened to another level, because there really is no one else. What was the second highest score by an England batsman in this Test?
33, I think, yeah.
There you go. So it's heightened now. And so you're right, it is like, why are you so happy? Because it's really tough out there. And yet maybe it's just this is England's leading run scorer of all time now. That maybe there is that level of, he may not show it in the way that Kohli does, but there's that competitive edge where it's like, okay, right, now my team really needs me, I'm going for it. And so that's something to be really
he's quite
to admire as well.
He's quite bullish as well. Like something he says the phrase, "That's just something we have to live with." Loads. So you're without your best player. That's just something you have to live with. The schedule's crap. That's just something you have to live with. There's no milk in the fridge. There's just something you have to live with.
He's had to live with not having the best team England put out for most of this year. And so he's I guess when everything's going against you, you it gets to the point where you're like, screw it, I'm just gonna. I might as well try and enjoy this as much as I can.
Taha, a lot of people commented on the lack of preparation, specifically red ball preparation, England's batsmen and bowlers had going into this Test. How much do you think that is to blame for how a lot of the England batsmen performed?
I think that's probably overplayed a bit. Look at KL Rahul. How many runs did he make? Made over 100 runs this match, batted beautifully. Played 2 first-class matches in between his last Test match and this one. One of them was last month, where he got 100 against that county select 11, which obviously, big tick, which, what the other England batsman would not have got in the last month. But, everyone, this is not just an England problem. This is a problem across global cricket. India, these India guys aren't playing, bucket loads of first-class cricket. You turn up on the day and you have to adapt. That's just how it is. Now, you can say administrators need to solve this. They need to rejig the calendar, but in a way, it is still the playing field is not so it's not so different for England than it is for other countries. And so you turn up, you rock up on that Test match, and you got to do it.
Yeah, I think you're just kind of more likely to get weirder results in the first Test of series now. The home team has even less preparation than the away team sometimes. I mean, England won that first Test in India, were better prepared than India. They had 2 Test matches in Sri Lanka just at the back of that. And, you see stats going around like Butler in the first Test match of a series averages not very much at all. And you of course, he's not going to average that much. He's not played red ball cricket for absolutely ages.
But you've got to remember as well that there is work that players can do against the red ball that doesn't happen in a first-class game. And I mean, it can make it slightly frustrating almost from a fan's or a journalist's point of view when you're trying to sort of say, England should pick this player over this player when actually you have no evidence to go on. But so when you look at Bairstow in that game, who was England's second best batsman, I mean, I think probably all of us have been pretty critical of Bairstow and his weakness against straight balls and that sort of thing. And sort of there is an argument to be made that how is he going to solve that if he's not playing any first class cricket? Well, he showed in this game that there was at least tentative steps towards doing that, and he hasn't played any first-class cricket. That's just work that he's done in the nets, even off the field, just kind of thinking about how he wants to approach it and that sort of thing. And all of that stuff can still happen. Obviously, ideally, you would play loads of first-class cricket in August, and I mean, ideally, you just play all your cricket in August somehow, but that's obviously just not possible. But there is stuff that players can do off it as well. So it's like players can get better and worse, and they can do that playing first-class cricket and not first-class cricket. And you've got to remember that like nothing is fixed, I guess. It's just
Cameron, what did you make of Bairstow's return?
I thought he looked really, really good. And obviously there's the problem that he's got 30 twice. But he has made an obvious technical change where he's kind of shuffled across. And his problem before was he was getting bowled through the gate, basically. And now his gate is outside the line of the stumps. So I don't know. It seems like quite. If he misses it this time, he's just going to miss the stumps. But no, he was. I mean, even when he
gets LBW like he did in the first inning.
It's pedantic. But even like when he got out, like he's nailed that pull shot. He looked amazing. I've yelled shot at my telly and then gone, right, okay, cool. See you, mate. Like come back next week. But I was kind of listening to previous episodes of this pod, and we're talking about Bairstow going, I don't think he wants to be picked. Like he wants to play for Welsh Fire. He's nowhere near the Test squad. And now, say Pope's back for this Lord's Test, I reckon it's Bairstow who plays over Lawrence. And so in the case of, maybe it's another sign of how poorly England's batting is currently, that 60 runs across 2 innings, he's all of a sudden in England's top 6 again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the change in technique, I think the point you made is valid. You can improve away from the cameras. And I think he's done something quite similar to what Rohit does in Test cricket, where Rohit bats further across towards off stump than he does in white ball cricket. And like Bairstow is genuinely standing like 2 or 3 stumps further across to off than he does in white ball cricket. And I thought he did actually look pretty solid, and he has been a very good Test cricketer in the past. And in an ideal world, and I think we say that a lot on this pod at the moment, in an ideal world you probably wouldn't be recalling someone who has barely got a run in Test cricket the last 3 years, but he's someone with a record behind him and an appetite to change.
I was chatting to Ricky Clark for a piece about
Name
batting
drop.
techniques.
Name drop.
It's not the biggest name drop in the world.
I don't know.
But he was saying that he started his first class career on leg stump and now takes middle and off in same type of gear as all the stuff that you've been hearing players talk about on Sky, like cover one side of the edge, get your right eye over off stump, etc. He said in white ball he still goes to leg stump basically, and he just says it is that difference in plan between red and white ball, where the ball in red ball cricket is more of a variable, so you kind of have to kind of negate for that, whereas it's not going to move about as much in white ball cricket, so you give yourself more room and you just hit through the line. And how that is an example of, well, Bairstow's now following suit and kind of has those 2 different plans. What I'm really nervous will happen is Bairstow, who is arguably England's best ever white ball batter, all of a sudden has this new technique and scores no white ball runs now, and you'll be like, we told you to stick to white ball, Johnny.
At least England got 1 million white ball batsmen to replace him if that does happen. I don't think it will.
Yeah, but genuinely going back to like, almost peak Bairstow issues, I guess, around the 2019 Ashes, and there would have been, I don't think it would have been a popular move, but there would have been an argument to kind of say, Johnny, like, okay, you've won us a World Cup now. Now we've got an Ashes in a couple of years' time that we really want to win, and we think that, like, he can be a world-class Test batsman, he can be a world-class white ball batsman. Didn't seem at that point like he could do both at the same time. So it's like, okay, now you're just going to be our Test gun number 5 in our engine room. You're going to do that. If you can do both, obviously amazing. Remains to be seen after a couple of 30 odds, but positive signs.
The top 3 copped a lot of flack this Test. Their 6 scores were 0, 18, 27, 18, 28 and 6. The light roller asks, time for Crawley to have a break? ? What do you think? Any of you?
Yeah. But I also didn't think he should have played this Test either. I mean, you look at those. I mean, it almost seems mean to have the conversation again. But averaging 11 for the year. His first innings 27 was his second score above 20 in 12 or 14 innings this year. And then you zoom out, you look at the overall numbers, averaging 28 in Test cricket, below 31 in first class cricket. He obviously has that, even with that one huge score, boosting those numbers. So yeah, I think it's time for a break. If England still have him penciled in for that Ashes squad, I don't think anyone would have a huge issue with that. I mean, it sort of makes sense. This technique might be more suited to those conditions, and you can get away with an Ashes squad can be quite big, and especially this one you think would be very big. You can get away with a couple of sort of like picks that are based on hunches, a bit like, it's not dissimilar to a James Vince for the 2017-18 Ashes pick. So I think just let him go and play the 100, play whatever else he can play, just get away from the limelight for a bit, pick him for that Ashes squad and kind of see how he is. But yeah, I mean, would 100% back Hamid to be making more runs than Crawley right now.
So I don't disagree with any of that, but I think it's quite interesting to kind of dwell on what's changed in a year. So I don't think that bad players score Test match 267s, and I also think that the 267 has almost made people forget actually what was happening in Crawley's Test career prior to that 267. It wasn't a complete flash in the pan. He got progressively better against really good South African attack. He got a couple of good half centuries before the 267 that summer. Looked really good in the inter-squad game last summer. He edged out Joe Denley in the team, who wasn't doing that badly. What do you think's happened?
He was building up towards that 267, and you're right. With that innings, it's become easy to forget everything else that happened. Even after that innings, he's had that horrid run, but that half century against India was delightful, wasn't it? It was like, oh right, he's back in the team, and look, this guy can play. I wrote that England should pick him for this first test. My thinking was, my thinking is simple, is in that I think he's a really good player. I think there's a player there. I think there's a player who's about more than that 267. I also thought with that gap, he'd mainly just played white ball cricket, but he'd maybe got that confidence that was clearly didn't seem to be there against New Zealand. Maybe he'd got some runs even if they weren't Test match ones. And in this test, I thought he played well in that first innings, like that 20-something. He was looking good. And so there does come to that point where, the scores just aren't there. And so you are pretty much almost better off picking someone else. If Hamid wasn't there, I would think play him at Lords. He showed something in that first innings, go for it. But Hamid is there and he's made a strong case, not just with the county championship runs, but with that century against India. So with Hamid there, I would now pick Hamid over Crawley. But I don't think I totally got England's thinking with picking him for that first test. And to be fair, even if they did pick him in the second test at Lords, I wouldn't be totally against that. But Hamid is there now. I think it's probably Hamid's shot now.
I think that's really fair. I mean, for me, one of the reasons why I would drop Crawley is because I do genuinely think he's got a decent shot of doing well in Australia. And England have a top three at the moment where you look at them, and even in the form that Crawley's in, I do back Crawley to have the best Ashes out of the three of them. And he wouldn't be the first person, a top order batsman, to really struggle in England and then thrive in Australia. I mean, look at David Warner, he averaged like 10 in the 2019 Ashes and then rattles off a triple hundred in his next home summer in Australia. And I think that I basically think I think he's having a really similar summer to what Hamid had away from the spotlight in 2017, 2018. I think he's really vulnerable outside off stump. And I was actually thinking about this yesterday. I think Pakistan were almost like the perfect attack for him to play against last summer in England, in that they had Shaheen, who's brilliant, but he's a left arm who swings it in. Naseem, who's really exciting, but he's pretty quick, not a huge amount of control yet. And Abbas, who's again brilliant, but he's very stump to stump. They don't really have like a traditional seamer who just swings it away outside off stump in the same way. And I think that kind of suited Crawley's game quite well.
That is surely a problem though, if Crawley's weakness would be a traditional seamer who moves the ball away, because there's a lot of those in cricket.
Well, it explains a first class average of less than 31 from 61 games, which is a big sample size.
But I think it also means that, like, actually, I don't think you can guarantee that if you do drop Crawley, he is going to go away and dominate county cricket. I think when county championship is played, I think he might struggle to that. I think also one thing about his, like, about looking at him and doing it by the eye test, I think there is a risk to that, because I think that, like, he is a player basically who can hit very nice cover drives even when he's horrifically out of form. So that's what's happened this year basically. Against India in one test, he managed to string together 10 cover drives and then he got out, and then he, I don't think in that 27 actually, because I was really willing him to be back in form and to look good. So I even tweeted like, that was a really great job. He played to get past 20, but then actually he was playing and missing a lot, didn't really look at all secure. I really, really don't think England should be like at all thinking about picking him, because I think if you're trying to win a test match against India, you don't pick a guy who's averaging 11 in like 8 tests for the year. Like you just like that's.
It's the 5th worst calendar year average of all time among batsmen who've batted more than 10 innings in a year.
I totally understand that. I sound like one of those old school scouts in Moneyball who just who's just he looks good.
That's the thing.
So
he really passes the eye test.
It's a lovely sound off the bat.
At what point do you like trust your eyes over every other bit of available evidence, basically?
Look, 267. That's the thing. Like he did. It's not. I don't think it's as simple as eye test versus look at the numbers. He did do well last year, and not just in the 267.
I was wondering with that kind of Moneyball shout, I was like, is Zach Crawley like Billy Bean, but like the player, where everyone said you're amazing, everything about you is perfect, you have this amazing cover drive, you can do things that none of us can do, but you can do it like once in isolation.
Guess we'll see in 30
and
years.
I hope that's wrong, because it is like, as you said, that 50 against India, I was like, this guy's the best player in the world. Like he's going to play for the next decade. He's going to just hit the ball on the up through the covers, and I'm going to love every single second of it. And now we're here talking about he's averaging 10. It's horrible. I mean, like he, out of everyone, would be kind of hating this the most, as it were.
So would you guys have all have Hamid in for Crawley at Lords?
No, having just said that, I'd pick Crawley again. Yeah.
How come?
And this is such a negative way of selecting a team. I'm just worried about just mentally breaking all these guys coming in and just not scoring any runs. At the moment, I think Crawley is in the process of just having a terrible run of form. But I feel like he's only had, I know it's just 8 tests, but it's kind of 1 in Sri Lanka, 1 in India, 1 against a great attack in New Zealand. Oh, now he's playing again. So it's not like an extended run of bad form. It's isolated matches over a period of time, if that makes sense.
Isn't that form though when you combine those together?
Maybe.
Averages about 30 in the county champ this year as well.
I do see what you're saying, because they picked him for this New Zealand for this India series because, like, not because they had any evidence that he was any better than he was against New Zealand, but just because they kind of some time had passed and they kind of hoped he was.
I think if he's in your top 3 for the first match of the series against India, that doesn't change off the back of 2 bad scores. So I think that you pick him again. If he gets 2 further bad scores, then it's Hamid's turn to nick off for 10, and then we can talk about who's going to be in the Ashes top 3.
I think we almost get into like an ancient Greek philosophy paradox at that point. That like you're not a bad player after 1 bad score, but you're also not a bad player after 2 bad scores. But at some point, after some string of bad scores, you are
3 scores changes everything.
It wasn't all doom and gloom for England. Root aside, Anderson was majestic. Robinson picked up his maiden fifer. Taha, your moment of the week was Anderson getting Kohli?
Yeah, it was just a beautiful piece of theatre, wasn't it? You know, like we've talked about before, there hasn't been a major amount of build up to this series, but then when something like that happens, where you know Anderson gets Pujara out, and then there's this lovely build up as he's running into Kohli, and you're thinking just before he's about to release it, you're thinking, oh, we could actually get him here, and then he does with an absolute beauty, and it was just you could see Anderson's reaction, how much that meant to him. First time he got Kohli out since 2014, of course. And Kohli, obviously, he's just such a theatrical player. Even when he bats beautifully, it's something majestic to watch. But even when he gets out, there's something majestic to watch, because there's that oh, I'm out. How is that possible? I'm the best player in the world. How have I just done that? And there's always that element to him, isn't there?
I don't think he's got enough runs recently to kind of justify the quizzical look of astonishment at getting out
but
early.
He still does have 70 international centuries to his name.
This is true.
He's still Virat Kohli.
Yeah.
There was a great interview with Anderson on the morning of day 3, I think, when he was talking about the ball to get Kohli. And so if you remember the 10-11 Ashes, his new trick then was the wobble seam ball that sort of comes out without the seam upright, so it can sort of hit it in like dart either way. In this game, he was like somehow swinging the ball that was bowled with a wobble seam. So he was bowling it with deliberate in-swing to Kohli, and then hopefully it would pitch on the wobble seam and then go one of 2 directions. And that's what got both Pujara and Kohli. Was a ball that was deliberately swinging in and then seaming the way that even he didn't know which was going to go. And in Kohli's case, it went away, and that is very, very difficult to play. And it's just crazy that he's bowling better now than he has ever before in his Test career. And
crazy, he's England's fastest bowler at 39 as well. I know obviously there's no Mark Wood or Jofra Archer in the team, but he was hitting 85, 86 reasonably regularly.
In the last 2 weeks, I've decided I hate speed guns, so I'm not the person for that question. Can I say on that one thing that Ben was saying about the wobble seam, something I love about Anderson and what I find a mark of how good and skilled he is the way he's improved is by effectively getting a bit worse. Like, the wobble seam delivery is what club cricketers across the land bowl a 10-over spell of every single weekend because they can't keep the seam upright. Anderson has the perfect seam position, and he's gone, it's a bit predictable that actually. I'm just going to make it wobble a bit on the way down, but wobble the amount I want it to wobble. And just kind of amazing how it's like the arc of kind of an elite performer, that you get so good at something that you can almost kind of, by regressing a bit, you can improve yourself.
How impressed were you by Ollie Robinson, maiden 5-wicket haul? It's a great start to a Test career on the pitch.
Yeah, we talked about this in our daily videos as well that have been going up after each day's play. That Robinson, if you look at the opening stages of an England Quicks career over the last few years, probably aside from Jofra Archer, who, we remember that Lord's Ashes test, that Ashes series, and Toby Rowland-Jones to an extent, who obviously we unfortunately didn't get to see much of after his first summer. Robinson sort of fits into that category of he's immediately you can see that he's got the attributes to be a quality Test match bowler, particularly in England. He's got incredible control of the seam. He's accurate, but then there's also the natural attributes of the bounce he gets. I mean, he bounced out Rohit Sharma, and so there's everything there. We know you can always sense that this guy is gonna, whenever he plays Test match cricket in England, he's gonna deliver for his country. We'll see what happens overseas, but right now that's a massive tick for England that they've got that guy. They've got another one basically. They've obviously got quite a few. Injuries mean that sometimes they're almost forced to pick certain players, but he now fits into that category. We're gonna see him play a lot of Test cricket in England.
He senses that he's ready as well. He was asked after play, like, "Are you surprised by the start of your career?" And he said, "No, not really. I've thought I was going to have a Test cricket for 2 years." Which, I mean, if you look at him in first class cricket, you can understand why he thought that.
Yeah, 100%. That what's his record over the last few years in the county championship is incredible. It's just England's depth in that area that's sort of means that he's had to wait his time. But he's obviously, what an impression he's made in these first two tests against New Zealand, the World Test champions, and then India, who are right up there, of course.
Final thing on England before we go on to India. What were your thoughts on the balance of the side, going in with 6 specialist batsmen, keeper, 4 bowlers, Sam Curran at 8, no spinner?
Yeah, we got a question, didn't we, about what does that attack did okay in this test? What was it like if India bat for a day and a half, 2 days? And you've got to think that England bowled well to restrict Pujara, Kohli, Rahane to 9 runs between them. That's not going to happen every time. And yeah, I mean it's tricky because there's no way to balance side properly. That's what Stokes does. I mean you remove a batter from that lineup, England maybe only lead by 150, and if there's no rain, then India actually a well ahead. Maybe even they win it on day 4. So I mean, I still would like to see Leach play, but I can see why they're picking the 4 seamers. I don't think it's ideal, but I don't think anything is ideal at this stage.
Yeah, as we keep on saying.
Yeah.
I didn't like it.
Something just got to live with,
yeah. Yeah. I didn't like it initially, but I actually did by the end of the test. At the end of the day, England didn't play that well, but were in with a 30 to 40% chance of winning the game on day 5 with a 6 out of 10 performance, which I think is partly due to just having a very deep batting lineup.
We all fall in love with this game for different reasons. For some, it might be batting. For some, it might be fast bowling, watching a fast bowler run in and deliver. For me, it's watching spin bowling. And so you can imagine my frustration when I see that England have not picked a spinner for the 3rd test in a row in England, and that Ravichandran Ashwin isn't playing for India. But let's focus on England first. For me, I see Sam Curran at 7. What we saw with that England test team in having, Butler at 7, Curran at 8, had the feelings of a football team picking 5 at the back. Let's play it safe. Let's we're not doing too well right now. Let's
how you win major tournaments.
let's keep it steady. Let's sort of part of the bus. I always want to see a spinner in a lineup. Maybe England think it doesn't work, but I'm not speaking from the perspective of England wanting to win the game. Okay, I'll be honest, I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who wants to watch the game. I want to see a spinner. It doesn't have to be Jack Leach. It could be someone else, Matt Parkinson. Mm-hmm. But I want to see a spinner in a test lineup, and so that grates at me a bit when when we've just come off the series against India, when away to India, you realise that there's this big gap for England in how they face spin bowling, but also how they bowl. As well as Jack Leach bowled in that series, Akshar Patel, Ravichandran Ashwin, different class, and so you want to see some sort of indication that you're gonna try and groom a spinner. You try and build a team that can have that spinner. The great England team of the century had a quality spinner. Your spinner is so important, and you just don't see that with the England team. Now, I understand Ben Stokes isn't the team. If he is in the team, it becomes much easier. And yes, there's an element of risk in Sam Curran batting at 7. But the way he batted in this test and the way I've seen him bat before, I think he's that guy you can have there. Josh Buttler bats much better at 6, by the way, than he does at 7. I don't really know why, but he does. Okay, and so there is. I looked at that, and just from a perspective of someone who wants to enjoy that test, I find it frustrating that England just aren't picking a spinner.
I think the problem I find with Sam Curran at 7 is it's like Sam Curran scores useful 30s, and 30s become progressively less useful the higher up the order you go. And so like Buttler bats 7, averages 33 in Test cricket, and he's underperforming. And so if Curran's batting 7, that same innings he was played how many days ago is worse than if he does it at 8. And that's a kind of nonsense about cricket or whatever. I think for this Test match, I think they picked the right team. It is obviously just a bit rubbish that we can't get a spinner in at the moment. So it was raining about. I don't know what the forecast is like for Lords.
Really good.
Really good.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
23, 24 degrees and sun.
Jack Leach is a 92 at Lords, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Get him in at 7. He's the all-rounder to balance the side.
But I think two things that are possibly slightly contradictory, not quite contradictory, but they don't argue for the same point at least. This conversation might well be different if we'd had a 5th day, India cruise it 3 down, and all of a sudden you think like, actually, England kind of need a spinner for those sorts of situations. The other side is that Sam Curran ideally would be in number 7 and did look like he could be sort of like that long-term game changer in that role at the end of his first year in Test cricket, but hasn't been in great form with the bat since then. Obviously, it's good that he looked in a bit better form this test, and maybe England can trust that and think like, okay, maybe we can push him up to 7, but that would be a leap of faith. You can't. I think it's that first series that he had was the second series he had was so dominant that you can sort of like convince yourself that like that's what Sam Curran is, when actually that probably gave us a slight overestimation of his batting abilities overall, at least the level he's at the moment.
Briefly on Sam Curran, I do think that he's a player that we almost take for granted as someone who just, because he's so talented, you can kind of throw him into a Test match and he'll be fine. But he's played so little red ball cricket. He's still very young, barely ever plays in the county championship anymore. And there's some criticism of how he bowled in the India first innings in particular. But I actually thought he looked pretty threatening early on, and then he was just a bit loose, bowled a little bit too full. I think he'll just get better with the ball as the series goes on. And in the past, you kind of forget how good he can be with the ball in home Test matches. I mean, in that Edgbaston Test match in 2018, he kind of ripped the heart out of that Indian middle order. In the Oval Ashes Test match in 2019, he was probably the most the most threatening England bowler to Steve Smith. I think he can be a really good bowler. I think he'll get better as the series progresses, and also with his batting as well. He just hasn't played that much red ball cricket recently. I wouldn't be surprised that he plays a breakout innings this series. He doesn't normally get lots of Test matches in a row. He kind of fills in, and he's going to get at least 2 in a row in this series. And he played that ridiculous ODI innings in India, and there wasn't a huge amount in his limited overs career that suggests he could score 100 from number 8 or number 7, whatever it was. So I think I wouldn't be shocked if he produces something like that at Lords.
I just feel he's the type of cricketer that you do have that leap of faith with, because he is. What is Sam Curran? That is the question that's been bothering us for so many years, and yet
we've got at least 7 articles.
But the answer is that he's a hell of a cricketer, and if you just put that trust in him and say that you're going to bat 7.
So who's it's out for you? Lawrence and no Pope, or Pope at 5, or?
I mean, I haven't thought it through that much, but what I'm thinking is that you get a spinner in there. That's how you get him, and you play Curran at 7.
Because the other argument is Leach over Broad, which, I mean, Broad was probably the worst fingers bowlers in that game. There doesn't need to be an indictment of him saying he's finished or you're dropping him, whatever. I think you can look at Anderson and Broad and think, are each of those guys going to play all 5 tests this series? Maybe not. So maybe you give one of them a breather for this game, especially if it is going to be hot and it's at Lords. And maybe it'll spin a bit on the final day. I mean,
yeah, I see what you're saying. I think I'd definitely play Broad at Lords. I'd see what you're saying about, are they realistically going to play both play 5 test matches? I think the first 2 test matches are back-to-back. There's a break, then 3 back-to-back test matches. So probably look to rest one of Broad Anderson in the third and fourth probably. Good reminder from Taha, actually, we've got daily mini pods on our YouTube channel. So they're about 5 to 7 minutes long. We'll get them up on the evening of each day. So if you want to see kind of a bite-sized analysis of the day's play, head to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter. You'll see us posting about it, etc., etc. On India, I thought one massive plus for them was how good Rahul and Rohit looked. There's no guarantee, even with Rohit's runs recently, that he was going to transfer that form into in English conditions. Rahul was class. Yeah.
So good to see him back in Test cricket. We saw the last time he was in England where he closed out that series with a knock that said, "I've struggled. I'm just going to go for it," and he went for it. I remember India were 3 down for nothing in that last innings at the over. Yeah, and he was playing his shots. And he's we see him in white ball cricket as well. He's such a lovely player to watch, such a fluent player to watch. India's depth, is staggering. Not just in white ball cricket, but we see it in red ball cricket now. I mean, he's got into that side because Shubman Gill's injured, Mayank Agarwal gets hit, days out. And then there's that element of pressure where you've got your one chance, you've got to take it, and he's taken it beautifully. And yeah, I've always I just feel he's just too good a player not to have that substantial Test career that he's threatened to have in the past. And
Yeah, but for Rohit, there is, I think, going to be that question until he gets that big score overseas in these sorts of conditions. I mean, he's looked the part as an opener overseas, looked at it in Australia, looked at it in the World Championship final, looked at it in this test, but is still without that landmark score. And actually, those games have been sort of marked by him looking absolutely class and then kind of giving it away. And at some point you start to wonder if that's not just like one of those things, but actually if the concentration needed to survive for that long against that high quality bowling, when you're not getting the sort of like, the reassurance, the reassurance of like a release shot every now and then, that if that is what builds up and then eventually he's just like, okay, now I deserve to be able to dominate, when actually you kind of, that maybe in England you never get to deserve it. You just have to have those short passages where you like get a couple away and that's it. So I think that like until that happens, I mean, he's definitely got the skills to score a really big score, looks absolutely brilliant. But until that happens, I think there is just going to be that little question mark, and you'll feel that if you can just keep up the pressure for long enough, you are going to get a mistake, I think.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I guess another positive for England is that engine room of Pujara, Kohli and Rahane do still appear to be quite vulnerable. Since the start of last year, Pujara averaged 25, Kohli 23, Rahane 27. With numbers like that, you struggle to get in the England team. But another positive for India was how good Bumrah was. There were question marks about his form coming to this series. He had a couple of games out taking many wickets, took 9 in the match. He looks borderline unplayable when he's on song. The outswinger, in-swinger to Burns was like reminiscent of how he got Jennings out 3 years ago. I mean, if you're low on runs and you're an opener facing him, like, good luck.
And the ball that just tails into the left hand.
Yeah.
So just beautiful to watch. He's just such a lovely.
So late as well.
Yeah, and he's just that little stuttering run up, and then just what he gets when he releases the ball is just phenomenal.
Yeah, you forget how freakish his run up is, because it's not a run up.
Yeah.
Like, you think how, like, he's like 90 miles an hour doing that. Like, how quick would he be if he actually ran in? It's like it's not far from like what a spinner would do, really. Yeah. Like Matt Parkins probably runs in more than Jasprit Bumrah does, and he's the slowest bowler in world cricket. It's like
it's a really, really short run up, but then when you actually look at it, it's a trot for the vast majority of it. It's only a run when he basically gets to the umpire.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah, absolutely.
And it just like slams down. It's
Cam, just on the Indian team selection, how surprised were you that Ashwin was left out?
I think, looking backwards and looking forwards, I think it is kind of a case of 2 different things. I think in general, cricket can get a bit ahead of itself with picking for conditions, but I think it was the right decision for the Trent Bridge test. I think it's not a coincidence that England went without a spinner, and it just so happens that India have two guys, went with Jadeja, who can bat incredibly well at 7. I think for Lords going forward, I think Ashwin is a better bowler than Takut. That's like, I don't think that's the most controversial thing that's ever been said. Regardless of the conditions, you get him back in the team. Like, even the conditions might suit Takut a bit better, but Ashwin is good. Is my hot take for today.
Excellent.
Pod debut playing shots. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of think that it's just not an either or with Jadeja and Ashwin. You pick out Jadeja away from home because he's a really good number 7 and his bowling's a bit of a bonus. You pick Ashwin because he's one of the best 3 Test bowlers in the world. I also think on Jadeja, he's almost I've not really thought this through, so I might edit this out. But he's almost a template for what you want Sam Curran to be in Test cricket, like a brilliant bowler at home who can bat 7, but away from home, really handy 7. His bowling's a bit.
How's Sam Curran's left arm spin?
I think is Jadeja the, if you could pick one player to be all 11 in your 11, is he that man in world cricket?
He's your John O'Shea.
Yeah, or Glenn Phillips. I mean, because he actually bowls and bats and keeps, doesn't he? But
Jadeja would do all right with the gloves on, I reckon.
Standing up to Jadeja, though, that's pretty hard.
That would be tough for Jadeja.
That's a good question, though.
Yeah, probably save it for a pod when there's not like loads of international cricket on. But yeah, pretty good.
Save it for the next lockdown.
But on Ashwin as well, one thing you forget as well is that he is far from that sort of bowler that really needed those helpful Indian tracks and like an old ball and stuff. Like, he's brilliant. He's one of the best new ball bowlers in the world, really. One of the best new ball spinners there's been. I mean, you remember the 2018 tour to England when he was just absolutely working over Cook, sort of like bowling him top of off stump the first 2 innings in that series, I think, with, Cook's one of the best players England have ever had, and Ashwin was all over him with a new ball in English conditions. I think that
it was brilliant in Australia.
Yeah, exactly, and he's doing it with kind of with drift and with flight as well. It's not just that he needs to get it off the pitch to do it. He's just a bowler who is at this point at like the top of his game, and kind of needs to just play whenever he's fit, I think. Yeah.
Before we get on to the rest of the show, Ben, there have been increasingly loud murmurs over the last week the Ashes might not go ahead. Do you want to explain why and how likely do you think that is?
Yeah, as far as I understand it, there's kind of like a few varying complaints. There's like the central one is if players' families aren't allowed to travel with them, then that will lead to lots of England senior players being like, well, I don't want to spend 4 months without my partner and children, which is fair enough. But I think I would be obviously I haven't been privy to discussion or anything, but I would be surprised if that was what happened, considering the India tour last year, their families were able to go with them then, and the Indian players were allowed to go outside of the bubble a little bit, not too much, and there was the controversy when they went to the restaurant and had like a selfie with a fan, and that led to some of them being in self-isolation, that sort of thing. So there's that, but then there's also just do you want to spend 4 months in near bubble conditions, considering how draining we know bubble life is,
and how much bubble life they've had. I think that's the big difference between England going this winter to India last winter, is that the England players have spent so much of the last almost 2 years by that point in bubbles, whereas for India then it was reasonably novel. And also how draining like an Ashes tour is, like with those, with the Aussie journos fighting that sort of phony war, saying like one of them, Malcolm Knox, who's former CA comms officer, was sort of like citing Australia's like better COVID like handling as like a sort of reasons why England should stop like whining so much, basically. And it's like, God, this is 6 months out. It's going to be absolutely awful there. And if you're there and all you can do is stay in your hotel and read the Australian or Sydney Morning Herald or whatever, that is not a particularly fun place to be. That other Australian newspapers are available.
Yeah, but yeah. So I mean, I think it's. But then I guess you could maybe look at it and be like, are England posturing at this point because they want to get the best position possible for their players and to have the easiest possible tour, which would be, I guess, a fair enough thing to do. But also there might be a little bit of politicking going on there as well. So I think my position is just hold fire. Don't get too worried. Obviously, no one has been able to buy plane tickets to go and see it anyway. But don't worry too much about that, and just keep an eye on it, I think.
Mm-hmm. We're recording today's podcast at Sixes Cricket Club. If you haven't heard about Sixes Cricket Club is the new cricket-themed social entertainment venue with a restaurant, bar and cricket nets. We played it last week after last week's show. It is really so much fun. Great for a birthday, I think. Sixers have clubhouses in Fulham, Fitzrovia, and a third venue opening up in Manchester on August the 29th. All Wisden podcast listeners can receive 10% off their food and drink by quoting Wisden 10 on their booking notes or when they arrive at the venue.
Shout Wisden 10 at someone.
Yeah. Anyway, on to the 100. In the men's competition, you'd say that every side, with the exception of London Spirit, are still just about in contention. Top spot goes straight into the final. Second and third contest what is effectively a semi-final. Trent Rockets are top, Oval second, Southern Brave third. Manchester and Birmingham are fourth and fifth with a game in hand with very good net run rates. What's caught your eye this week, Cam?
I think we are going back a week ago. It was David Willey's performance against London Spirit. It was just exciting to watch. He put a ball out of Lords, and it was one of those things where someone next to me said something like, "Oh, it is the short side." I'm like, I don't need that. He's hit the ball out of the stadium. And then they've got to whatever they've got to, and then he's ended up bowling incredibly well. And what's just adds a bit to it all is that it's in front of the England captain. And I was there for both the games against where David Willey played, and then the Trent Rockets game where Alex Hales had played against Owen Morgan the week before. I found it really interesting that Hales, on the first ball he faced, hit a bump ball into the hands of Point, and all of the Trent Rockets or London Spirit players have claimed it. Chuck the ball out, you're out. And Morgan, just like everything else involving Hales over the last 2 years, just wasn't interested. Was just walking off in the other direction 30 yards away. So I just found it did catch my eye that David Willey just put in this amazing performance in front of the England captain, and just the contrasting tales of two guys on the outskirts, one maybe a lot further away than the outskirts of the white ball squads.
Yeah, that was my moment of the week actually.
Oh, yes.
Was being at that game with my brother and my nephews. It's probably quite an interesting case study there in terms of like how the 100 is getting people involved, because my brother sort of like is a fan of all sports, I suppose, probably a bit more into cricket now because of so that we have something to talk about basically. But he's been getting to the 100 specifically because of the women's games that are being on YouTube. I think there was a feeling, maybe a fair one, and obviously being on BBC Two is a massive platform to have, and it's great. 3 more games on BBC Two now, which is really exciting. But YouTube is not, it's not as if you'd only find something on YouTube if you go searching for it. I think if you looked up the odd cricket video on YouTube and you happen to go on there, which quite a lot of people do when there's a game on, that it will get recommended to you, and that can help get someone more into cricket. I think that is a big thing. And, you know, my nephews love YouTube, so that was so they were basically putting those games on in the afternoon through the TV and watching those quite a lot. So they came to that game because they wanted to see Jemima Rodriguez bat rather than because they wanted to see any of the men's players. But yeah, and they loved it. They had a great time. They do now think that David Willey is the best player to ever lived, and are retrospectively absolutely fuming about the 2019 World Cup squad. But yeah.
That's really interesting. I really like Birmingham Phoenix at the moment. I think it's such a fun batting lineup, in particular, captained by Moeen. But the batting lineup of Finn Allen, Will Smead, Liam Livingstone, Moeen, and Chris Benjamin. Smead, for one, is at 19 at Somerset. You've been talking about him for a while. He's a real talent, but also he's got enormous biceps, huge biceps, very strong young man. And then I don't understand how, I know we talked about him a little bit already on this pod before, but I just don't understand how a player as good as Benjamin could have been stuck in the twos earlier this season. He's so calm and collected at the end of a run chase. I think he's been at the crease at the end of a run chase 3 times now already this tournament, successful run chases, and 2 of them were like he played properly pivotal roles in those.
That second run chase, I was sort of, as he was getting there, I was thinking, yeah, this guy wasn't playing professional cricket a few weeks ago. Like, surely he's going to be like, yes, come on, I did it. And he's just cool, ice cool. I was like, oh, this guy's serious.
But
he's
also
proper.
because there was chat that he got, Moeen liked him because he just butchered spin basically in this twos getting, but he was doing it against the quicks as well. You know, we've inquired about his availability for England and South Africa internationally at the moment. I'm not sure about South Africa, but I think he is eligible for England. I'm not saying he should be in the England squad now, but I genuinely think if he's available for South Africa, like they could do a lot worse than give Benjamin a look in before the World Cup. Was that your moment of the week?
Oh, mine was David Willey, but I'll go with Benjamin again.
Yeah.
I find it. We were talking earlier about kind of the eye test with Crawley, and this is this an argument in favour of the eye test? Because like Moeen Ali's obviously seen him once. He hasn't gone, God, I reckon that guy's got good numbers over mid wicket. Yeah. He goes, this guy's awesome, and he just keeps on going up the levels. I don't really have anything constructive to say on it because it's completely baffling. He was a university cricketer 3 months ago, and apparently cricket's the easiest game in the world for him, and just keeps doing very well.
No, it's crazy. Saqib Patel for England, anyone? He's striking at 174 with the bat, averages 18 with the ball, really good economy rate. Is he a better T20 player than Liam Dawson, who we just assume will eventually be in the World Cup squad?
Yeah, he might be. I guess England, is he a better T20 bowler than Liam Dawson? Maybe, but Dawson he's also a very good cricketer, and I think that England are probably looking for that person to be more of a bowler than a batter. I think that if they are looking for a back-rounder, obviously the utility is very useful, and is why Dawson kind of eventually made it into that World Cup squad, because he is just so useful. I also think that they do just like Dawson a lot as a character, whereas like sometimes not for his own fault, sometimes for his own fault. Sometimes there's been just like a bit. He's always been just that sense around him a little bit that he has sort of courted a little bit of that, and you're not going to get that at all with Dawson. But if you're looking for, he's probably. I mean, if you're a T20 side, like a franchise side, I think you're looking at Patel before you're looking at Dawson. I think if you're building a squad and you're looking at like squad cohesion and all of that sort of thing for a World Cup, I can just about see how Dawson edged in. But yeah, I mean, he's doing himself absolutely no harm. And also, I think we need to remember that actually, because he obviously has played a lot more cricket for England than Dawson has, but he never looked out of his depth for England. He was, in a way, almost slightly harshly treated in ODI cricket. Like, he averaged about 30, striking at nearly 100, I think, which is, for that time, in a way, it's more impressive because it came at that time, but it was also underappreciated because it came at that time when people sort of looking more at the average rather than the strike rate and being like, well, he's a... Yeah, and it kind of felt like he was almost contributing basically every time he came out. So I really like him as a cricketer, but I do think that Dawson is still slightly ahead, but it'll be an interesting one come the time. And also, I haven't actually thought about England's full T20 World Cup squad in a while, but I do wonder actually, even if Dawson is still in there, or if you end up having like Parkinson as your second spinner, and then your utility players are your quicks, I think, possibly. And
Moeen and Livingston just cover bases.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. So if you've got Moeen, Livingston, Rashid, and possibly Parkinson, those are your spinners,
probably,
I think.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Ben, yesterday's games at the Oval was slightly frustrating. We even had Gary Lineker getting involved. Do you want to explain what happened? Because there was a reasonable amount of ire online. Yeah,
well, it rained a lot early in the day, and it really did lash it down. I mean, it was kind of wet rain that you could be out in for only a few minutes, and you would be absolutely kind of soaked through. So this was big rain. But then it didn't rain a whole lot after the crowd actually got into the ground, probably a period of about 20-25 minutes, and yet the women's game was entirely rained off. The men's game was reduced to 35 balls a side. That in itself is frustrating, and you can possibly make an argument that, in terms of player safety versus crowd entertainment, that maybe that should have been tilted a little bit more and they could have got the game on slightly sooner, because it was the outfield that was wet rather than the run-ups or the wicket itself.
And they brought the boundary in quite a lot.
Yes.
On one side of the ground.
Yeah, but I think what really frustrated the fans was just the lack of communication, especially if you've got new fans there. If the sun is blazing, the covers are off, and all you can kind of see is a couple of people sort of standing around, and then every so often you get told there's going to be another inspection. That's not enough, basically. I think that, and especially because some of the crowd entertainment has been questionable, but they do have these sort of these
compares,
kind of going around doing stuff. If you get one of them just to interview one of the umpires to like explain what are the dangers going on, what are the things that are going to affect this, and that sort of thing. Because I actually saw one person suggest like could they have like crowd entertainment involving the players and that sort of thing. I don't think the crowd needs to be entertained. They were pretty good at entertaining themselves. I mean, Big Lee had his sort of the Surrey groundsman, his moment in the spotlight when he was throwing sawdust down. Every time he was doing it, they were going like "Oi" and building up, going "Oi," and he was playing up. It was great, almost better than the 100 in a way. But so the crowd they weren't essentially too like mean spirited or like they just wanted to know what was going on, and they weren't getting told it, basically. I mean, I think maybe Lizzie Ammon tweeted that her son was like calling and texting her, and she wasn't at the ground, asking like, and he was at the ground asking like what was going on, and that speaks volumes about just the lack of communication, I think. Yeah,
I think that there were two sides to it. One, so like Lineker, for example, was saying, "Is this actually dangerous?" And I think Jason Roy and Sam Cook have come out after the game and said, yeah, it really was. It's really it's hard to see exactly how wet the outfield can be unless you're quite close to it, I think. And I think that's fair. And I think, yeah, the main gripe really is the lack of communication, especially when you saw players from both sides training and doing drills over most of the outfield. To be honest, the only bit they weren't on was the very specific bit of the field that was supposedly too wet. And I think especially if you have new fans, you just have to explain. Don't just say it's a wet outfield. Explain why a wet outfield is bad and why you can't play.
Because even we couldn't quite put our finger on why it was, while agreeing that like actually it probably isn't ideal to be playing on it. I thought of something else, because yesterday I suggested like a cricket ball is harder than the football, because obviously you can play football on a wet pitch. You can't play cricket on a wet pitch. Cricket ball is harder than the football, so actually maybe slipping and then getting hit by a cricket ball is a bit more dangerous. And also the thing I thought yesterday was actually footballers wear boots with studs, whereas cricketers wear
Spices aren't very good,
Yeah, they don't. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, I guess it's a very rare thing. But should cricketers have boots to wear? I guess you're not going to get a groundsman that's too happy about you running over the wicket with your studs on.
I guess I think
Ricky Wessels used to do that, didn't he?
Did he?
I think so.
Oh, really?
I think he used to wear blades in the outfield. I might have lied on the pod there, but I think it's true.
Okay, we'll look it up. I think the other thing that was interesting was like I'm not actually sure how much the conditions improved from 7 o'clock scheduled start time to 8:20, when they actually got on the field.
And you just still have players sliding around a bit.
Yeah.
A couple of sort of drop catch that you wouldn't have expected normally.
Yeah, and they did bring in the boundary rope, but like quite a long time after the scheduled start time. They did put a cover on one of the areas that was supposedly particularly wet, but again, quite a long time after the start time.
I think my impression of it the morning after is that it was almost like a missed opportunity for cricket, because I say cricket as if it's this massive wholesome thing. It came across as being kind of slow and curmudgeonous and that's outdated and like, let's just get the game on. And afterwards what's happened is the players have gone, it was really wet out there, that was actually pretty dangerous, and cricket has brought, I don't know why I'm talking about cricket as if it's a person, they've brought the boundary in hugely, and they've actually done loads to get a game on for the fans there. And so it could have been this thing like, look guys, this is like really bad conditions at the moment, this is why, but we're doing everything we can, the players are bang up for it, we're going to change the playing conditions of the game. And there's often kind of quite strict rules over boundary sizes in 2020 competitions. I don't know if it's the same for the 100, but they've gone a long way out of their way to get a game on, and the overriding response was, oh bloody hell guys, like hurry up. Whereas it could have been amazing, they've got a game on for us, I understand, and we've eventually got a very exciting game of cricket at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. My moment of the week was with that game when Alex Hales gets hit in the gooly woolly woolies, I think is what Ebony Rainford Brent called it. That was just amazing. Twice in a row. That was why it was so funny.
Twice in 2 balls, as you said on the Wisden Twitter feed yesterday, which obviously means 2 things. Can we spend a moment on Ebony's?
Go for it.
Like an incredible bit of commentary. Like I'm not being ironic or sarcastic here. Like you get these moments as a commentator, I think, that like are going to be instantly iconic, and you've got to come up with the line to sum it up. You think about Ian Smith, the barest of margins. Alex Hales, obviously a sort of a pantomime figure in English cricket, getting hit there is one of them. And for Ebony to like create an entirely new word that perfectly captured both the 100 and that whole moment, and say and the delivery of the gooly woolly woos, it is sensational. It's so good. And then she actually because she then did a sort of a NASA thing, the NASA-esque sort of like predicting what's going to happen a moment before it happens, saying like he needs to bowl that exact same ball again, and then the very next ball it hits him in the exact same place again. She absolutely knocked it out of the park. It was amazing.
It was perfect. It was Hales as well. Like if it was Laurie Evans, it just wouldn't be quite as funny. But yeah, we had a question from Bobson Dugnut, who said, here's an idea. Rain will affect play, that's a given. When it does, the squad could play little mini games close to the boundaries with commentary and on the big screen, e.g. LMS, slip catching, a throwing competition, or French cricket would be fun for the kids. I'm not against that, to be honest. They're not really doing anything in those rain delays. Yeah,
but that's so also Bobson Dugnut. I get the reference. That's not an actual name there.
Yeah, I kind of got that. But I had to call him something.
Yes, but as I was saying, I don't think the crowd were bored. They just wanted to know what was going on. So I don't think that. I think they would almost felt patronised if they were like, we're not going to tell you what's going on with the cricket, but we're going to like have some players playing some football. And if that would almost annoy them more, being like, well, you're playing football, aren't you playing cricket? I think so.
Yeah, that's fair enough. In the women's competition, Southern Brave are 3 points clear at the time of recording. Birmingham and Manchester are really struggling at the bottom of the table. Superchargers, Invincibles and the Rockets have all got 7 points from 6 games behind the Brave at the top of the the table. Just a general point about 100. It's gone really quickly. We're really close to the end of the group stage, and I'm kind of left wanting more. Genuinely,
it's gone so quickly that you wonder if in the future they are going to be able to find a full window for it, so that you can give it your full attention. So that you actually, because I mean, the end of the group stages are going to feel like a little bit like they're alongside the test match. You're not going to be able to have that full focus on who needs what, why each game is so important, when it is just something you're flicking onto because you just need to. You feel gluttonous and you want a little bit more cricket at the end of like a full day of Test cricket. So I think. Like it's yeah. I mean, I think possibly. I mean, I haven't worked out how it could fit in, and that's I assume why they haven't done it. But I think that would be great if they could essentially.
Absolutely. We've got a question about the Royal London One Day Cup. Ben Turner asks, "Who are some of the Royal London One Day Cup players impressing you, especially some of the youngsters?"
We saw Lewis Goldsworthy at the Oval the other day, hit 96, and he's got now 4 half centuries in 6 innings, something like that. Yeah. Nice, impressive little player. Played at the Under-19 World Cup last year. Is that right?
Yeah, he did. He's a very good left-arm spinner as well. Actually.
Yeah, so he's got that too.
The next Liam Dawson or next Sam Patel, that kind of player. Ben, you had a couple of players?
Yeah, Rob Yates was the main one for me. He's 21-year-old Warwickshire top order bat. There was a really good 100 he got against Notts, I think, in a game that was actually pretty feisty. And I'm really enjoying when the One Day Cup gets feisty in particular because I've been enjoying it. Been watching just a lot of games on the stream, but it does like it's kind of just good to know that like county cricket still matters to a lot of people, to the players and the fans and that sort of thing. But yeah, there were a couple of controversial umpiring decisions in that game. But yeah, I've really liked him, and he's not young, but I'm glad that George Munsey has got a chance to kind of show what he can really do. He's like averaging 70 and striking it plenty for Kent. Obviously, Scottish player who can kind of he's sort of an inventive batsman and can hit the ball a really really long way. So good to see him. Churn it out a bit.
Got called up obviously after that COVID outbreak, and he's just stuck around.
Yeah.
I'm going to go for 3. I'm going to go Jamie Smith, not necessarily for his on-field performances, but I just think it's interesting to see which players the counties are cashing in on and saying this is our guy for the future in these roles. So him captaining the side at 20 or however young he is. I thought it was really cool to see Rishi Patel get 100. I know Paul Nixon, the coach there, has said he thinks Patel could play international cricket within the next 4 years and has all the attributes. So to see him kind of fulfilling on that promise, and kind of similarly with Feroz Kushi at Essex getting his first professional 100 yesterday. Because I know last year I expected him to be playing a lot more this year. And last year was kind of this breakout year where Essex had this new batter, and then I think it's Paul Walter has somehow kind of kept him out of the team. I say somehow, he's batted well, but he's kept him out of the team. So it's good to see Kushi get some runs in his return to the side.
And Rishi Patel's gone from Essex to Leicestershire, hasn't he? And so I think you always wonder if a player, because like if they start moving around counters at that age, you wonder if they are going to get that chance to sort of like bed in and show what they can do. And that's great for him as well, yeah.
Finally, Bangladesh at the time of recording a 3-1 up in a 5-match T20I series against Australia. It's the first time they've ever won a bilateral series against Australia. The Aussies are without a number of first choice players. A guy called Nathan Ellis, who I'll be honest, I've not heard a huge amount about. He took a hat-trick on his T20I debut in the 3rd game. Bangladesh's left-arm quicks have been in the wickets. Mustafizur has been doing well, and so has Shariful Islam, who's kind of the leader of the attack in the Under-19 World Cup winning team last year. Mitch Marsh is the only Aussie batsman to score more than 50 runs across the first 4 games, and he has something like 29% of their runs across the series so far. And there have been a couple of standout performances from other Bangladeshi players you probably haven't heard a huge amount about. 21-year-old Afif Hussain and inexperienced keeper Nurul Hassan took Bangladesh home in the run chase in the 2nd game.
So Dan Christian, he hit 5 sixes and over off Saqib and hasn't got 50 runs in the series.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that bowling scorecard for Bangladesh was a fun one. That's the one game Australia won, and basically everyone went at like under 5 and over, I think, and Saqib was going at 12 and he conceded almost half the runs in the game despite bowling 4 overs.
Yeah,
it's been a funny series, but quite a fun one, I think. Yeah.
That's all we've got time for. Thanks, Taha. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Cam. This has been the Wisden Cricket Weekly Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, tell your friends, and remember we've got the daily post-test YouTube videos, so check out our YouTube channel for those.